Hello once again, and welcome to Turning the Wheel. If this is your first time here, I am Megan Angus. Welcome to whatever this thing is. And in this next chunk of time, we are going to talk about the Wheel of the Year practice that pagans and lots of other polytheists observe. We're going to talk about holidays and festivals and holy observances from all over the planet and throughout time. But we are also going to talk about the current astrology with the sun, our current lunar cycles that we are following, how they are intertwined with some of these ancient calendars and timekeeping practices, as well as tarot and lots of other stuff. So hold on, strap in. Here we go. Now, before we get into the actual juicy goodness of what all is happening this week, I want to talk a little bit about lunar phases. The phenomenon of seeing the moon appear to have these different shapes. We have the crescent moon and a half moon and a full moon and another kind of half moon and another kind of crescent moon, and then the new moon where the moon appears to disappear or go black or go dark. This is all based on the phenomenon of us standing on Earth observing the moon in the sky doing its thing in its orbit, reflecting the light of the sun back to us from different angles. That's really all it comes down to. The moon itself is not changing shape, but it does appear to change shape. And it appears to change shapes cyclically over the course of about a month. Oddly enough, the word moon and month are pretty similar. I wonder if that's totally on purpose. Yes, it is, in fact. Okay. That is where we got the timekeeping idea of the month, and to divide it into 4 pieces that had approximately 7 or 8 days apiece. That all comes from humans observing this cycle of changes that the moon goes through month after month after month. So, pretty cool stuff. All right. Now, in this podcast and in a lot of my work, I mostly refer to the 4 big stages of the moon, and that is new, waxing, full, and waning. And we've kind of just left it at that. But going forward, we're going to expand our definition of the lunar phases to 8, which is sort of the common observance, I guess, in astrology and other circles. The moon, in fact, does have 8 phases. So let's talk about it. We're going to talk about it more in the coming weeks as we encounter each one of these phases, but I want to give you a brief rundown now so that you have a sense of what it is that we're going to be doing over the course of this year. So we start with the new phase. This is when the moon is dark. It's been dark, and we know that it's increasing from this point, but we still can't see it. So this is the new moon. And the type of magic, the type of symbolism that we might be working with on the new moon are things like birth, incarnation, awakenings, beginnings. And an image that we might keep in our mind for the new moon is a seed in the dark soil, getting ready to do its thing. It's a living seed, but nothing's happening yet. Our next phase is called the waxing crescent. And the word crescent means to increase. So right there in the name, we know that this is a moon that's growing. It's small, but it's growing. And the type of magic, the type of symbols that we're working with during the waxing crescent is overcoming inertia, focusing ourselves for the coming process. And during this phase, and it comes about 3.5-ish days after the new moon has happened. It's really basically, it starts the moment that we can see the crescent moon in the sky. It can pull on us, and it can really bring up a lot of stuff from the past, either the past lunar incarnation or like the past. And this is where that inertia piece comes in. we're trying to pull away from the past and grow toward the new. And that can be really hard. So the image that I like to think about for the waxing crescent is that seed that we talked about in the new moon. This is now the new shoot. The two branches, the two little leaves have poked out of the shell of the seed, and they are struggling to find the surface of the soil. It feels like stuff is pushing against them almost sometimes, and it can really feel like that, even though we have this sense of the waxing moon being, the time of increase no matter what. The waxing crescent, those first few days after the new moon, can kind of feel a little sluggish, and it's like, oh, I'm really struggling to get my engine going. Come on, man. All right. Couple 3-4 days after the waxing crescent, we come to the first quarter, or what I have been calling up until now, the waxing half moon. And that's because it literally looks like a half moon in the sky. And this is the time that we want to start deciding and acting and building. Our work is really focused on getting your headquarters in check and getting to doing. We are rising to the occasion during the first quarter moon or the waxing half moon. And our magical symbol, or our magical image that we're working with here, is that now that seed has finally gotten its shoot out from underneath the soil. It's getting sunlight, it's getting air, it's here in the world, stuff is happening. And now it's taking this moment to establish its roots and really kind of dig down and create a stability for itself. The next lunar phase that we work with is called the gibbous moon, Gibbous, gibbous. And this is that portion of the moon when we look at it that it's like, is it full? No, it's kind of an oval shape. Is it full? No, I don't think so, not yet. It's really getting there. Not quite full, not a perfect circle yet, but getting there. And the kind of work that we're doing on the gibbous moon is that we are evaluating our current process. We are refining the work that we're doing. We're perfecting our work if it's possible. We're analyzing stuff. And during the gibbous moon, it's possible to overdo that too. It's possible to definitely kind of go a little ham on really analyzing what it is that we're doing. And the image that I like to work with for that is thinking of the bud on the branch. Our little seed has grown up all the way into a tree at this point, is really kind of doing its thing, and now there is finally a bud on one of the branches. Then we come to the full moon. In the full moon, we come to a type of a crescendo. We reach a type of fulfillment of our last 2 weeks of working or planning or whatever it is that we've been working on. And we illuminate the situation. We ask for illumination, and we may get some illumination or even a spotlight on the situation. And we can see the situation in its full light and in its fullness. Our magical symbol that we're working with is that now that bud has turned into a piece of fruit. And finally, after all this hard work, a piece of fruit appears. Okay. Now we go into the waning phases of the moon. So this is the portions of the moon that are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So after the full moon, we come to the disseminating moon. And within that time period, we are working on distribution. We are working to convey what it is that we've been doing. And we are, how do I want to say this? In our magical symbol of the seed and the plant and the bud and all of this stuff, in the full moon, we have a fruit. In the disseminating moon, the fruit has ripened. And now it is actually appropriate to harvest it, enjoy it, eat it, taste it, talk about it with others. And in my notes for this, what I wrote was, having seen the miracle, we now go forth knowing that it's real, and we act accordingly. And that miracle might simply be our own process, but we've actually seen results, and we're now eating the results. It's time to enjoy them. Okay. The next lunar phase that we work with is the last quarter, what I have been calling the waning half moon. And this is another time for reevaluation, but it is a reevaluation that is turning us away from the process. We are revising things. And because what's happening is the seed of the new path, the seed of the next process that we're going to undertake, or the next portion of the process that we're going to undertake within the next lunar cycle, is already starting to form itself. So there's already things in us during the last quarter moon that are like, yeah, okay, here's all the stuff that I'm not going to do again, or here's all the things that don't need to be dealt with anymore, and I can move on to another portion of the process. We really are kind of differentiating ourselves from what was, and getting ready to start turning towards what's going to be. In our plant symbol that we're working with, the vine is withering at this point. And then that brings us to the last lunar phase, and this is called the balsamic moon, like the vinegar. And I really love that, because in this portion of the process, we are distilling what we have learned from this last month of work. And we are transforming that into the new seed that is going to germinate and do its thing in the coming new moon in the next couple of days. We are envisioning the next process. And just like when we were working through the waxing crescent, that we feel kind of a pull from the past as we are this seed that's trying to push up from underneath the soil, during the balsamic moon, we feel a pull from the future. We feel a pull from, time out of time that's like, cool, you did this. It's time to move on and come and do something else. I really love that this moon is called balsamic, and that it sits with our vinegar, because that is ultimately what we do with that fruit, right? Maybe the vine withers and maybe we make wine, but ultimately we're going to make vinegar with it. And think of all of the incredibly useful things that you could do with vinegar. It's just such a wonderful metaphor to work with. So, the other thing that can come up during balsamic moon is unfinished business. Whether it's from this lunar cycle or from some time before, something that is like, hey, I got to get dealt with before we go forward with whatever, that can come up during our balsamic moon phase as well. Okay, let's get on with the rest of the week, but I just really wanted to give you that groundwork for what it is that we're going to be doing as we go through this year, and we look at all 8 of these lunar phases within the spectrum of all 12 of the zodiac signs. So, as I always say, kaleidoscope on kaleidoscope, right? We are taking all these different wheels of symbol and meaning and myth, and we are laying them over each other and seeing what we can see. So, let's see what we can see. All right, this week kicks off with a new moon in Aries at 22 degrees of Aries at approximately 7:30 p.m. That's Pacific Standard Time. Figure it out for yourself. This is, for some, the 3rd month of the lunar year. We know that we have New Years happen all throughout the year. Lots of them happen between fall equinox and spring equinox. And we have a couple of New Years even this week for some cultures around the planet. So whenever we have a new moon, there might be a new year starting for somebody somewhere, either in the modern era or in the ancient era. If you work with my Wheel of the Year booklets and all of that stuff, you know that Raven Caldera, who we love and talk about a lot in our work, calls this the infant's moon. And really what we're doing on the new moon in Aries is we are coming back to our primal self. We are coming back to that sense of unshakable faith in the universe. And it's unshakable because we don't know any better. And I repeat that a lot as we move through Ostara season, and we're always going to have our new moon in Aries some point during Ostara season. This whole season is about, I don't know any better. Why not? Let's try it. What's that feel like? I've never done this before, even if we've done it 1,000 times. We want to try to come back to that place of naive wonder and curiosity. And so the new moon in Aries is really about trying to come back to that place in you that is very similar, honestly, to the Fool card from Tarot, where it is me or you or us blindly walking off the cliff, not because we're stupid, not because we're foolish, but because we are bound up in our unfathomable and unshakable faith in the rightness and the goodness of the universe. Sometimes it can be a real reality check in that process too, and sometimes we need that reality check, but we also really need to come back to that place of, I don't know, and I'm excited that I don't know. Let's go find out. Okay. We want to come into an energy that is very brash, very bold, very curious. Another tarot card that we might work with, if not the Fool card, is the Four of Wands. The Wands card, the suit of Wands is very tied in to Aries and all of the fire signs. And so that is another card that's can be really potent to work with at this time of year. On this new moon, we want to lay out a blueprint for what we might want to accomplish this year. I definitely recommend doing that kind of work. And the more audacious, the better. The audacity, yes, is literally what we want to summon right now. I absolutely encourage you to work on a set of goals of things that you would like to accomplish this year. And that can be all kinds of stuff, but I really encourage you to include at least a couple of goals that literally scare the shit out of you. Or at least ask you to really challenge your narratives around your sense of self or your idea of self. As much as that kind of work is healthy for you to do. It's just a super potent time. On this same day, while we are experiencing the new moon in Aries, we are also going to be experiencing Venus in Aries squaring Pluto in Capricorn at 26 degrees. This is pretty much underworld work. Always. Anytime Venus and Pluto have any kind of anything going on in the sky, stuff can get a little spooky, can get a little funky, can get a little weird. When it comes to a square between Venus and Pluto, this can look like power struggles. This can look like control issues. And if there are tensions that have been sort of lying under the surface in your various relationships, they may come to the surface now. And as we look at the work that we're going to be doing magically for the rest of this week, it kind of makes sense. Okay. Ways that we can work with this new moon in Aries, as I've already said, we obviously can put blueprints and plans and lists of goals and things like that on our altars or our work tables or wherever it is that we do our magical work. But also, anytime that we have a new or a waxing phase moon in Aries, it is a fantastic time to adorn or do any type of gentle healing, gentle restoration, gentle support for our head, our face, our eyes, our brain, and our sinuses. This is a fantastic time to go get fake eyelashes, to buy some new eyeshadow, to get your hair did, to get a new dye job if you're into that, to get a new neti pot for yourself, like this, that, very supportive there. We love that. Side note, not a doctor, except for Dr. Love. We have already talked about that. So I'm not telling you any medical advice here. That's not what's happening. If a neti pot is not good for you, don't use it. So there you go. But anytime that we're working with the waxing moon phases while it is in Aries, we want to be focusing, or this is a way that we can work with it, is focusing on this portion of the body. Okay, now let's talk about the holidays that we are experiencing on April 11th. We really only have two. One is the feast day of Saint Leo from our Catholic friends. Not a lot to say about this guy. This is an old holiday for him. This is pre-1969. I believe St. Leo's feast day has actually been moved in the modern era to November 10th, something like that. I don't know. We'll talk about it again probably later in the year. What was St. Leo known for? Zealotry, really. Honestly, being like super hardcore faithful, like he was a faithful bro. He really broed down with his faith and was like super faithful. Also, he was known for being a peacemaker, being a really powerful orator. And when I looked up what his attributes were, because the saints are all patrons of something, right? He's the patron saint of the Pope's hat. And I was like, okay. But, doesn't that sit very nicely with our Aries New Moon, right? On the head, a big golden hat sitting on top of the head. Very Aries New Moon. I'm sure it's a coincidence. All right. The other thing that we have on the calendar for today is Esther's Day or Oster's Day from modern paganism. Now, we've talked about the quote-unquote modern pagan dates that are within the calendar. The Wheel of the Year has become really, really popular, and lots of different witches, pagans, heathens, and other polytheistic groups around the country and around the planet have invented and shared calendars. And some of the dates that are on the calendars, when we look back through history, they don't really seem to have a historical connection. Some of them are pretty close. Some of them are dead on. So it's kind of all over the board. Having a day dedicated to Oster right now totally makes sense. If it was in September, that would be a little odd. Have we already passed spring equinox? Yeah. And have we already also had Easter, the Catholic holiday? Yeah, we just had it. But that's okay. What I have said before with a lot of these modern pagan holidays is that they usually are close enough that if you want to just have a day that's dedicated and you don't want to have to do the math every year of like, what's the lunar phase and do I add or subtract 3 weeks? I don't know. You can just say, oh yeah, April 11th, close enough, good enough. It's a lovely Sunday. We're happy with it. But let's take a moment here and talk a little bit about who or what is Oster or Oster or Esther. Oster is the name of a West Germanic goddess. And this goddess is only documented in one place, by the Venerable Bede in his 8th century current era work, The Reckoning of Time. Now, this was a book that literally talked about the solar observances of various pagan groups. So people that witnessed the equinoxes, people that witnessed the solstices, as well as other astronomical ways of keeping time. Other than this documentation by the Venerable Bede, this name Oster doesn't exist anywhere. However, linguists have reconstructed the name of a goddess named Austro, A-U-S-T-R-O. There's a bunch of hyphens and dashes and umlauts in there. Go look it up yourself. But they have reconstructed this name Austro in Proto-Germanic language. And this name ultimately relates back to the name Huesos or Hausos, Ausos, Osos, which means dawn. But it also means to shine or glow red or a flame through the suffix os, O-S. This word or this name also underlies the root word for gold, aurum, in Proto-Indo-European. And we see traces of this goddess's name everywhere, from the goddess Usas in the Hindu Rig Veda, the Balto-Slavic Dausos, which is who was a goddess of the sky and heavens, the Welsh word Gwarer for dawn, the Old Norse Auster and Austri. Auster literally means east. Austri is a dwarf that holds up the eastern pillar of reality, and even this may ruffle a few feathers, but even the Persian Zaustra. That phrase means in the morning, and it certainly sounds relatively similar to the name Zarathustra. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Okay. This character, Hausos or Hausos or Ausos, is an unaging goddess who is depicted coming into eternal youth. The word brilliance, or words that mean brilliance or shining or lit, are often used to describe this goddess. She is often depicted in gold, saffron yellow, red, and crimson. And some myths say that she is born of the divine horse twins. And that's really interesting, because she is, in fact, a solar deity, and she is... and a lot of these names relate back to solar deities that specifically have to do with the dawn, the image of the sun rising on the eastern horizon. It's a very northern hemisphere situation. Sorry, everybody in the southern hemisphere. But this idea of being born of the divine horse twins, that's trippy, because lots and lots and lots of solar deities throughout time are depicted in a chariot drawn by two horses or two creatures of some type. Two cats sometimes, but two horses. That image of the twin horses, that's Gemini. And that is currently the sign that ends spring. So, pretty cool imagery all across the board there. Let's move on. April 12th, the moon enters Taurus. We can still think of the moon as very, very young, but we want to kind of start interpreting it away from the new moon and more toward that waxing crescent idea. And so while the moon is in this phase and in this sign, we want to focus on the intimacy of small-scale work and cultivation, as well as the paradox of creating, or the creation of the new, as the destruction of the old, or what was. Remember when we were talking about that in our moon phases, when we come into the waxing crescent, there can be this pull from the past, and this pull of like, but remember how it used to be, or remember what you're totally surrounded by that you're trying to grow away from? That thing. So that type of stuff could come up for us on this couple of days that the moon is going to be in Taurus. We want to focus on healing and adorning and supplementing, attending to, in gentle ways, the mouth, the ears, the neck, the throat, and anything having to do with our speech or our hearing. So again, that could be very gentle healing practices. That could be really gentle strengthening practices. Anything that is adding to and not taking away from the mouth, the ears, the neck, the throat, the speech, hearing. So maybe it's time to buy some new lipstick or some new lip gloss. Maybe it's time to get some gems added to your teeth. Maybe it's time for some new earrings. Maybe it's time for some new necklaces. Anything along those lines. Maybe it's time for some new cough drops because you do podcasts and talking to clients all the time and you want to switch it up. Whatever. Just giving some special attendance to this part of the body and the things that we do with this part of the body or these parts of the body, really, really helpful and invigorating, I don't know, adding to the quality of life. All right, what else are we doing on April 12th? Not much. It's actually a really quiet day. I think that I have listed in the calendar that Ramadan starts this day, but I looked it up again, and Ramadan is listed as starting on April 13th. But you know what? Let's just talk about it anyways, and if you're a day early, cool. At least you were a day early and not a day late. What is Ramadan? Well, Ramadan is pretty much one of the biggest holidays for our Islamic and Muslim friends here in the US as well as around the world. There are millions and millions and millions and millions of people that practice Islam. And this kicks off an entire month of holy practices and festivals and all kinds of really cool stuff. This is for Muslims the 9th month of the calendar. And as soon as the crescent moon is spotted, the month begins. This is a month of fasting, prayer, reflection, self-improvement, and community work. Some Muslims will abstain even from things like smoking and drinking or sex or sensual contact and other behaviors that kind of fall into those categories. And it's just a really beautiful holiday. Charity and community work is huge, huge, huge during this time period. Give some love and give some support to your Muslim friends and your Muslim neighbors as they are going through this process, because it is a little bit arduous for them to do that. Things that are appropriate to say to folks during this time are things like Ramadan Mubarak, which simply means happy Ramadan, or Ramadan Kareem, which translates approximately into have a generous Ramadan, or bless your efforts during Ramadan. And on the last day of Ramadan, which is Eid al-Fitr, the greeting changes to Eid Mubarak, meaning, happy Eid. And Eid is also a really big day as well. We'll talk about it in a month when we get to it. April 13th. On this day, astrologically, we have the sun in Aries sextiling Mars in Gemini at 24 degrees. So this could be a day of really spicy communication, lots of I can't think fast enough, and I'm really, really excited about it. Just witness yourself if you're feeling really antsy about things, or if your mind is racing really intensely. It might just be a moment where you're let me take a breath. I know I'm excited. The world is new, and I'm new too, and I want to rub myself on it. But let me just compose myself before the humpery begins. Okay, let's talk about the holidays. From April 13th to April 16th, we have the water festivals happening all across Southeast Asia. This is a New Year's celebration that takes place in places like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar. Many, many prayers of peace and many, many prayers of safety to our brothers and sisters in Myanmar, as well as Thailand. It's called the Water Festival because there is lots and lots and lots of ablutions and lots of cleansing. People sprinkle water on each other as a sign of respect and friendship, but people do lots of ritual washings of their property, their animals, themselves, each other, their items, all of that good stuff. Very similar to the baptismal kind of gig. We are also seeing Basaiki from our Sikh friends. This is the start of the warrior month for Sikhs, which sits very nicely with our Aries symbology. Also happening on this day is the amazing egg rolling day from the UK, which is literally exactly what it sounds like. People get together and roll eggs down hills. Okay. Sometimes they're dyed, sometimes they're raw, sometimes they're hard-boiled, sometimes they're just chocolate eggs, whatever. What I thought was really interesting was that there's a lot of magic around the egg shells, and there is a tradition that you have to crush the eggshells and get rid of them, or witches will use the shards of eggshells as boats. So, roll an egg down a hill and crush up the shell, and either you can use the crushed shell as protection or in water protection spells, or if you're really crafty, use the egg shards as a boat. I'm excited to hear about it. Okay, what else is happening at this time of year, on this day? We have, from our Japanese Shinto friends, Kamotama Yorihime. This is a festival dedicated to this goddess. She is the daughter of a sea dragon god. She is probably the mother of the first emperor of Japan. And she kind of represents an object that a divine spirit is drawn to. I had a difficult time finding good information about this deity, but I think it's interesting that she's connected to sea energy. Because in sidereal astrology, we are in just the last hours of Pisces season still. We'll talk about sidereal astrology again going forward. If you missed that, go back to one of the other podcasts. What else is happening on this day? We have from the ancient Romans the Veneralia for Venus and the Fortuna Virilis for Mars. The Veneralia was an ancient Roman festival dedicated to Venus Verticordia, which means Venus, the changer of hearts, and Fortuna Virilis, which is virile fortune or manly aka Mars and Martian type energy. And then it became a holiday that was about being chaste and worshiping a version of Venus that turned hearts toward more proper behavior, quote unquote. And why was this going on? Because really, it was more beneficial to the state. That's basically it. The Romans were basically trying to turn their populaces from being total warmongering, drunken party animals into a more civilized populace that was easier to get labor out of, basically. And so they were like, quit with the humping. Good Lord. Despite all of that prudish bullshit, during Veneralia, Venus's cult image was taken from her temple to the men's baths, where it was undressed and washed in warm water by her female attendants, and then garlanded with myrtle. And myrtle is definitely an herb that is associated with women's health, the protection of women, all of that kind of stuff. Interesting also that Venus is the ruler of Taurus, and of course, we are just about to go into Taurus season in tropical astrology. Last holiday to talk about on April 13th, and this is a festival that runs from April 13th to April 22nd, is the Chaitra Navratri. This is from our Hindu friends, and this is a mighty, mighty, loud and brash and potent ass festival celebrating the warrior goddess Durga and her triumph of good over evil. If you haven't read the myth of Durga and the works of Durga, I highly recommend it. Durga is very much a feminine version of our Mars warrior energy. She rides a tiger. She basically carries every weapon known to humanity. And she really just goes ham on anybody that she is pissed off at. We love her. She is dressed in red and saffron yellow and gold and crimson. And yeah, she's basically a badass. I don't know. So this is a big week-long festival dedicated to her. Moving on to April 14th. We see Venus enters Taurus. Venus is very excited to be in Taurus. And so that is really supporting that Taurian energy that we might have been working on for the last couple of days. But also on this day, the moon enters Gemini. So let's talk about that first. Coming back to that kid stuff that we were talking about with our Aries New Moon. When the moon is in this phase and in the sign of Gemini, it is a time for us to take a look at old communication patterns that we may have learned from the adults that were around us when we were kids, the forms of communication that we learned, and see where that's not working for us. See where those things might be holding us back. Remember, we're talking about the waxing crescent, so we're getting pulls from the past, things that might be inhibiting our forward growth. So this is a time for us to kind of take a moment and look at those things and decide, like, what communication styles and what communication patterns did I learn as a kid or learn during earlier portions of my life that are like not serving me right now and in fact might be holding back my growth? Is there a place where I can initiate change here? Also, there might be some stuff that comes up with siblings, with neighbors, that kind of thing. Okay. We want to focus on adorning and healing and strengthening the shoulders, the arms, the wrists, the hands. Are you shouldering too much? Is something that you might ask yourself during this time period. But maybe it's time for a new luscious lotion for your arms and shoulders to have those gorgeous shoulders glittering in the sun outside. Maybe it's time to start a gentle healing practice for your shoulder joints or your elbow joints or your wrist joints. Do you write a lot? Are you sitting at a desk all the time and your limbs need some support? This would be a great time to consider those things. Okay. In sidereal astrology, the sun is entering Aries today. So, this is our goofy thing with sidereal versus tropical. We've talked about it in other podcasts, so I'm not going to go into it too hard on this one, especially because we are already 40 minutes in. I'm on brand. Okay. But we're 2,000 years behind. That's TLDR. So the sun has just entered Aries in sidereal in the actual physical sky. The sun has just come into alignment with the constellation of Aries. So if there wasn't Aries energy around before, it certainly is now. What else is happening on April 14th? April 14th through April 25th kicks off the Norse festival Sommersblot. I have a big ol' piece on my website about Sommersblot. The word means summer's blood. Big ol' piece about this. And this is really where the Norse folk open the solar half of the year. A lot of the Norse folk, a lot of the ancient people that we think of as living in that portion of the world really only celebrated two halves of the year. And as soon as the light started to spill down into the valleys, screw it, we're in the solar half. I don't care what day it is. Close enough, we're good to go. And that was basically one half of the year until we hit around Samhain, approximately, and that brought in the lunar half of the year or the dark half of the year. They really didn't mess with the other holidays too much. And that's different for different groups of people, but we see that. Like some pagans worshipped observed nearly all 8. Some pagan groups observed only 2 or maybe 3 months or portions of the year at a time. So anyways, huge piece on my site. It's very, very cool. And in that piece, I have some recommendations for ritual, for runes that you can work with, altar suggestions, some tarot card suggestions, etc., etc. Also on this day, we have the Shangxi Festival from China, Korea, and Japan. And this is another holiday where people are going for outings by the water, having picnics, they're plucking orchids. This is basically a day for invoking cleansing rituals, very similar to the festival we were just talking about yesterday, to prevent disease and get rid of bad luck. And this day is also considered traditionally the possible birthday of a figure called the Yellow Emperor, who kind of resides in a place that's sort of in between being a real person and a deity of a type. The Yellow Emperor was known as, or is known as, a healer, a political advisor. They invented the calendar. They really are kind of at the root of a lot of Chinese culture. So really important. But again, that yellow color, right? Gold, yellow, red, crimson. We know what's up. Okay. Also happening this day, New Year's for our friends in Bengal. All right. April 15th. April 15th is the actual waxing crescent moon in Gemini at 11 degrees, approximately at 10:57 p.m. PST. We already talked about the kind of work that we're doing for the waxing crescent moon in Gemini, so just continue that work for today. We're going to do it tomorrow on the April 16th as well. This also kicks off our Celtic tree month of Willow. This month will run from April 15th to May 12th. The willow moon was known to the Celts as Salge. The willow grows best when there's lots of rain, and we're certainly still getting that at this time of year. This is a tree that is associated with healing and growth. A willow planted near your home will help ward away danger, particularly the type that stems from natural disasters like flooding or storms. Perhaps you might crush a bit of your eggshell at the root of your willow tree. They offer protection and are often found planted near cemeteries. This month, I recommend working on rituals involving healing, growth of knowledge, nurturing, and also women's mysteries, if you are working with that Celtic tree month pattern situation. Also happening April 15th through the 17th, Feast of the Seas. This is another modern pagan holiday, and it is really just intended to honor all sea deities. We've already seen a little bit of sea deity stuff coming up with the Kamo Tama Yorihime holiday on April 13th, the daughter of a sea god. And we are going to see more and more sea and ocean stuff come forward because as we come into spring, we see the holidays, a lot of them begin to incorporate blessing and opening up the waterways for travel and for trade. And so that becomes a bigger and bigger element of things that's going on. That's in fact part of the Sommersblot stuff. We'll talk about that, or you can read about that in the thing. Okay. What else is happening on this day? Dies Natalis for the temple of Quirinus. This is a Roman holiday / Roman deity. Quirinus may have been a war god. Often, we don't have a lot of information about them. They are often connected to Janus Quirinus. And we already know that the Romans and the Greeks, as well as the Egyptians, had this really cool habit of sort of adding words to the names of deities to say that, yeah, that deity does that stuff too. And so was Quirinus first? Was Janus first? We don't know, but at some point Janus was connected to this deity. The word Quirinus also describes Roman people in their peacetime aspect, which I love. Again, that's that idea, like, the Romans were just like, look, when we need you to go to war, we'll push the button and like you can go and be this ravaging army, but the rest of the time we need you to just be calm and chill, okay? So we have this like the Venus, the Veneralia thing that's like, quit humping everything, and now Quirinus that's like, just calm down and be peaceful. Like, what's going on? What's interesting though is that this deity or this character is also associated with Myrtle. So I don't know, just interesting. Okay, also happening on this day, from our modern pagan Wheel of the Year calendars that we see around the internet, we have the Feast of Tellus Mater. The goddess or the deity Tellus Mater is the Italian deity that is the Mother Earth. She is very similar to characters like Kybele or Mother Magna or Mater Magna. And she was often invoked during earthquakes, so all of us here in the Pacific Northwest maybe should have a little altar to her. She was also invoked in solemn oaths as the common grave of all things, meaning that everything was going to go back to her at some point. She's also really similar to the Greek Demeter because she was a goddess of marriage, but she was most revered in conjunction with Ceres as a goddess of fruitfulness. Last but not least for this day, we have, again from modern pagan calendars, the Feast of Bast, who is the Egyptian cat goddess. We actually talked a lot about Bast during Imbolc season, and I'm not going to take up more time. Go back and listen to those podcasts. Okay, moving on to April 16th. We have, from April 16th to April 25th, the Lyrids meteor showers. The likely peak for the meteor showers this year is Thursday morning, April 22nd. The best time to see this is after moonset and before dawn. It is going to appear that the shooting stars are radiating out from approximately the constellation Lyra the Harp, near the star Vega. You can use a star finder app, there's free ones, and search for the constellation and the star, and then just look in that portion of the sky, and there you go. This is a really popular meteor shower. It's not that spectacular, but we've literally gone like 4 months without a meteor shower. And so people that love to skywatch are like, I need my shooting stars. So here, some are back. Okay. What else is happening on this day? Saint Padarn's Day from our Celtic Catholics. Saint Padarn is considered to be a founding saint of Brittany. This is another dude that's just like famous for being famous. He was real faithful, and he also had a lot of faith, and he was like he was faithful. Okay, what I can really say about this guy is shown with lots of yellow, often depicted wearing lots and lots and lots of yellow or gold. Okay, moving on. April 16th through April 22nd is a tiny little old festival called the Megalesia from our Roman Greco friends. I have a huge piece on my site about the Megalesia. I wrote about it a couple of years ago. This is, as I lovingly like to refer to it, the ancient sparkle party for Phrygian freaks. who like to get down when it's time to get down. There is tree cutting, there is crucifixion, there is castration, there is transgendering, there is worship of the goddess, there is death and resurrection of the god. All the hits, honestly, all the hits. On my site, not only do I have a gigantic piece on this, but at the end of the piece also I have recommendation for ritual suggestions, altar making stuff, tarot to work with, and on and on and on. Even stones and plants, I think, to work with for this holiday. So check it out, Megalesia. It's I could literally, we're already at 50 minutes and I could do 2 hours on this one holiday. I have to stop myself somewhere, and I should have stopped myself about 15 minutes ago. Okay, let's move on. April 17th, the moon enters Cancer. Okay, and if we haven't gotten enough of our kid fear work already this week, here's a little bit more. While we are working with the waxing crescent moon in Cancer, we really want to take a look at our early nurturing relationships, and specifically, we really want to examine what didn't work or what didn't fit. And in particular, considering to yourself or asking yourself, were there some times in your childhood where you were told you didn't fit? If so, you may have internalized from an early age that there are parts of you that are just wrong and need to be repressed or changed. And I encourage you during these couple of days that the waxing moon is in Cancer to bring those parts of yourself up and out and give them some love and acceptance and especially approval. And if that doesn't speak to you, perhaps just consider ways in your life that you might have changed to conform to please someone you were dependent on. That's the kind of work that we're doing with the waxing moon in Cancer. Remember, it's the past pulling on us and saying, no, don't grow, don't bust out of your seed shell. Just stay here in the dark soil where it's comfortable. Okay. Focusing on adorning, gently healing, and strengthening our chest, our breasts, our belly, and our lungs. This is very much a time of enjoying and adorning and worshiping the booby goddess in all of us. So love your belly and its roundness and its lumps and its bumps and its curves and its swerves. Love your breasts, whether those are boy titties or girl titties or them be titties. Enjoy them, whether you've got 2, 3, 4 or more. Enjoy them, love them, nurture them. Maybe put some luscious ointments and lotions upon them. If you're a smoker, maybe clean out for a couple of days and give your lungs a break. Or if you have lung issues, this is a really great time to, if the weather supports it, collect herbs and collect things that you are going to use later medicinally to help you with your breathing problems and with lung issues and things like that. All really appropriate. What else are we doing on this day? Well, as usual, the synchronicity is unsettling. The 2 holidays that we are working with, while we are working with this waxing moon in Cancer that is encouraging us to kind of dig in and look at childhood places where we were told we were wrong, we don't fit in, we need to conform to fit the situation, we have, one, the Dies Natalis of the Temple of Fortuna Publica, which is literally the fortune of the people of Rome, and this is in continuance of all of these different Roman holidays that we're experiencing this week, where the Roman government is basically telling the people, you need to be like this. Stop being like that, be more like this. This is another one of those holidays. And then we also have the Feast of Saint Katari. This is a Canadian Catholic holiday that venerates the Saint Katari Tekakwitha. This was an Algonquin woman who lost her family through colonization and genocide. She was raised by the Mohawks, and at some point in her life, who knows what type of influences she was subjected to, she converted to Catholicism. She became a nun, and she died at the age of 24. She experienced smallpox at some point in her life, and her scars from smallpox were a source of shame for her. She is the only Native American or indigenous to Turtle Island person who has been canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. Let's hope there's no more, honestly. If we, I mean, this is to me just such a painful and gnarly depiction of this idea of you are not right, you have to conform. These are people who are in charge and in theory supposed to be nurturing you, and they're warping you. Ugh, gross. Anyways, light a candle for that poor woman. Maybe burn a bit of tobacco for her as well if that feels right for you. That brings us to April 18th, and the only holiday that we see being celebrated this year on April 18th is the Greek holiday of Delphinia. This was a festival dedicated to the god Apollo, who is a solar deity, but also is a deity in charge of or having influence over the sea. This holiday was held annually on the 6th or 7th day of the month of Munichion, which is the month of April, in ancient Athens. We don't really know a lot about this particular festival. All we really know is that there was some type of a ceremony that had some number of girls proceeding to his temple, the Delphinium, carrying branches and seeking to propitiate Apollo. We have a lot of branch-carrying holidays happening around this time of year, so it's very possible that this is sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of ritual forms that the Greeks were like, that looks cool, let's do some of that. That pretty much brings us to the end of the week. We made it. Woohoo! Okay. The next day, April 19th, that is going to be our waxing half moon in Leo at 0 degrees. Mercury enters Taurus that day. The sun also enters Taurus on that day. We are going to talk about that way more next week, but I just kind of wanted to give you a heads up on that. For me, energetically, kinda, sorta, I definitely think of the time that the sun enters Taurus as kind of like, it's sort of the default Beltane season. Beltane, of course, doesn't actually happen until April 30th, May 1st, by the pagan marking. And then we also have solar Beltane, which is, I think, May 5th this year, which we'll talk more about later. But anyways, just know, the sun is about to go into Taurus. So, yeah. All right, thanks for sticking with me this long. This was a full week. I really wanted to get into explaining what is going on with our various lunar phases and how we want to be working with them and envisioning them in our minds as we move through each of the lunar phases and each of the zodiac signs, each of the months throughout the year. The kaleidoscope wheels, they're turning. All right. Thank you for joining me. Blessed be. Have a beautiful day. I hope it is beautiful springtime weather wherever you are. If you're in the southern hemisphere, I hope it's beautiful fall weather wherever you are. Be kind to yourself. We have enough bullshit in the world right now. Be kind to your neighbors. Be kind to the people in your community who are suffering, who are downtrodden, who are having a hard frickin' time. We don't know why a person ends up in the situation that they are in. And it doesn't really matter. If somebody needs help, help them. If somebody needs a hand up in the pit, you pull them up, right? And you keep moshing. Aries season, it's about aggression, it's about excitement, it's about energy, but it is also about fighting for things that are sacred, fighting for people who don't have an advocate otherwise, being a sacred warrior, being an energetic force in the world for goodness and for positivity and progressive values, whatever that means for you. All right, that's it. Mwah. Blessed be. See you in the sun.